Chapter 1 of Jimbo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Jimbo by Algernon Blackwood. Read by Adrian Pretzelis. Chapter 1. Rabbits. Jimbo's governess ought to have known better, but she didn't. If she had, Jimbo would never have met with the adventures that subsequently came to him. Thus, in a roundabout sort of way, the child ought to have been thankful to the governess, and perhaps in a roundabout sort of way he was. But that comes at the far end of the story, and is doubtful at best. And in the meantime the child had gone through his suffering, and the governess had in some measure expiated her fault. So that at this stage it is only necessary to note that the whole business began because the empty house happened to be really an empty house, not the one Jimbo's family lived in, but another, of which more will be known in due course. Jimbo's father was a retired colonel who had married late in life, and now lived all the year round in the country, and Jimbo was the youngest child but one. The colonel, lean in body as he was sincere in mind, an excellent soldier but a poor diplomatist, loved dogs, horses, guns, and riding whips, and also really understood them. His neighbours, had they been asked, would have called him hard-headed, and so far as a soft-hearted man may deserve the title, he probably was. He rode 2 horses a day to hounds with the best of them, and the stiffer the country the better he liked it. Besides his guns, dogs, and horses, he was also very fond of his children. It was his hobby that he understood them far better than his wife did, or than anyone did for that matter. The proper evolution of their differing temperaments had no difficulties for him. The delicate problems of child nature, which defied solution by 9 parents out of 10, ceased to exist the moment he spread out his muscular hand in a favourite omnipotent gesture, and uttered some extraordinarily foolish generality in that thunderous good-natured voice of his. The difficulty for himself vanished when he ended up with the words, "Leave that to me, my dear. Believe me, I know best." But for all else concerned, and especially for the child under discussion, this was when the difficulty really began. Since, however, the colonel after this chapter mounts his best hunter and disappears over a high hedge into space, so far as our story is concerned, any further delineation of his wholesome but very ordinary type is unnecessary. One winter's evening, not very long after Christmas, the colonel made a discovery. It alarmed him a little, for it suggested to his cocksure mind that he did not understand all his children as comprehensively as he imagined. Between 5 o'clock and dinner, that magic hour when lessons were over and the big house was full of shadows and mystery, there came a timid knock at the study door. "Come in," growled the soldier in his deepest voice, and a little girl's face, wreathed in tumbling brown hair, poked itself hesitatingly through the opening. The colonel did not like being disturbed at this hour, and everybody in the house knew it, but the spell of Christmas holidays was still somehow in the air, and the customary order was not yet fully re-established. Moreover, when he saw who the intruder was, his growl modified itself into a sort of common sternness, that yet was not cleverly enough simulated to deceive the really intuitive little person who now stood inside the room. "Well, Nixie, child, what do you want now?" "Please, father, will you... we wondered if—" A chorus of whispers issued from the other side of the door. "Go on, silly! Out with it! You promised you would, Nixie." "If you would come and play rabbits with us," came the words in a desperate rush, with laughter not far behind. The big man with the fierce white moustaches glared over the top of his glasses at the intruder, as if amazed beyond belief at the audacity of the request. "Rabbits!" he exclaimed, as if the mere word ought to have caused an instant explosion. "Rabbits!" "Oh, please do." "Rabbits at this time of night?" he repeated. "I've never heard of such a thing. Why, all good rabbits are asleep in their holes by this time, and you ought to be in yours too by rights, I'm sure." "We don't sleep in holes, father," said the owner of the brown hair, who was acting as leader. "And there's really still an hour before bedtime, really," added a voice in the rear. The big man slowly put his glasses down and looked at his watch. He looked very savage, but of course it was all pretence, and the children knew it. If he was really cross he'd pretend to be nice, they whispered to each other with merciless perception. "Well," he began, but he who hesitates with children is lost. The door flung open wide, and the troop poured into the room in a medley of long black legs, flying hair, and outstretched hands. They surrounded the table, swarmed upon his big knees, shut his stupid old book, tried on his glasses, kissed him, and fell to discussing the game breathlessly all at once, as though it had already begun. This, of course, ended the battle, and the big man had to play the part of the monster rabbit in a wonderful game of his own invention. But when at length it was all over, and they were gathered panting round the fire of blazing logs in the hall, the monster rabbit, the only one with any breath at his command, looked up and spoke. "Where's Jimbo?" he asked. "Upstairs." "Why didn't he come and play too?" "He didn't want to." "Why? What's he doing?" Several answers were forthcoming. "Nothing in particular. Talking to the furniture when I last saw him. Just thinking as usual, or staring in the fire." None of the answers seemed to satisfy the monster rabbit, for when he kissed them a little later and said good night, he gave orders, with a graver face, for Jimbo to be sent down to the study before he went to bed. Moreover, he called him James, which was a sure sign of parental displeasure. "James, why didn't you come and play with your brothers and sisters just now?" asked the Colonel, as a dreamy-eyed boy of about 7, with a mop of dark hair and a wistful expression, came slowly forward into the room. "I was in the middle of making pictures." "Where? What? Making pictures?" "In the fire." "James," said the Colonel in a serious tone, "don't you know that you're getting too old now for that sort of thing? If you dream so much you'll fall asleep altogether some fine day and never wake up again. Just think what that means." The child smiled faintly, and moved up confidingly between his father's knees, staring into his eyes without the least sign of fear. But he said nothing in reply. His thoughts were far away, and it seemed as if the effort to bring them back into the study and to a consideration of his father's words was almost beyond his power. "You must run about more," pursued the soldier, rubbing his big hands together briskly, "and join your brothers and sisters in their games. Lie about in the summer and dream a bit if you like, but now it's winter you must be more active and make your blood circulate healthily, and all that sort of thing." The words were kindly spoken, but the voice and manner rather deliberate. Jimbo began to look a little troubled as his father watched him. "Come now, little man," he said more gently. "What's the matter, eh?" He drew the boy close to him. "Tell me all about it, and what it is you're always thinking about so much." Jimbo brought back his mind with a tremendous effort and said, "I don't like the winter. It's so dark and full of horrid things. It's all ice and shadows. So I go away and think of what I like, and other places." "Nonsense!" interrupted his father briskly. "When